Hey, folks, it's time for the quote of the day. And I'm not going to lie about this one. This was really, really tough today. Yesterday, I had a bunch of people to choose from on the 12th, and I ended up going with a kind of bargain bin Legion of Doom explanation as to these five different horrifying men that I was talking about yesterday. But today, I searched high and low, and I really couldn't find anybody that I was really happy with. That being said, today is Julia Louise Dreyfus's birthday, and I love her, but she doesn't have a whole lot of she's not like eminently quotable in a lot of ways. I mean, I can make jokes, but that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for me. um, Shauna Rhimes was born today, but it would be a little disingenuous for me to quote her. While she is exceedingly intelligent and has some beautiful, wonderful things she said, I've never watched any of the series that she's written, and so I don't know, I feel weird like not being a true appreciator of her art. Not to say I don't appreciate it, I just don't really watch like CBS and stuff like that. I don't really watch those kind of shows, so I really don't know much about her in terms of her art, and so I felt a little weird if I were to quote her, even though she does have some great things she said. And so instead, I dug around a lot. And I'll be honest, today was one of the days where I've come very close to giving up and just going with a quote that was more topical, um, and just abandoning the birthday thing. But then I saw a name that I recognized, a name that I knew a few quotes, or I knew the essence of a few quotes. I had to go back and look them up again. I had to kind of, reestablish who this man was in my head. But we're gonna quote him. We're gonna quote him. I need to give you a little bit of an understanding of who he was, though, because a lot of people aren't necessarily going to know who he is. Today we're going to be quoting George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. Now, if you don't know that name, well, you're probably sane. No, that's mean. I didn't mean to say that. Gurdjieff is still considered a very influential spiritual leader. There are some that would consider him to be a philosopher. There are many, more so a spiritual leader, a mystic. These terms usually apply to him. He forwarded the idea of the fourth way, and one of his teachings, which is borderline philosophy and spiritualism, is the idea that man walks, or woman, obviously, the individuals walk through their life asleep. That basically many of us, all of us really, we come into the world in a dormant state, and only those of us that really truly work at it uh, actually wake up and live the lives that we're intended to. Uh, a term that goes around today is a term that he actually, I wouldn't say he coined it, but he popularized it, and you hear it all the time. You'll hear it when you talk about people on their healing journey, or talk about people on their whatever journey that they're on, and people say, "Well, I'm doing the work." Well, that term, the work, it's often credited to like Carl Jung and people like that, but it actually comes from Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff actually is the one that coined it, and basically was like, to create or to become the person you need to be, you need to do the work. He believed very, very strongly in their pain being a necessity, discomfort being a necessity. Kind of the same, kind of along the same lines as Carl Jung. Carl Jung has actually said that Gurdjieff's work, kind of helped him arrive where he did. So you could say that Gurdjieff was a bit of a precursor, although I'm pretty sure that Carl Jung would have arrived there either way. And Carl Jung isn't necessarily. I mean, I know that he has a couple works that are spiritual in nature. He's not. He was never this kind of spiritual leader. And when I say this kind of spiritual leader, what I mean is, no matter what you believe, it cannot go without mention that Gurdjieff was often considered to be a con man. Uh, he even some of his devout followers, uh, after a while, started to see the way that he lived his life, and then see the things that he was trying to teach, and realize there was a discrepancy there. And he kind of taught this, like, let go of everything kind of asceticism, But he himself was living a life of luxury. He was charging top dollar for people to hear him talk. He was traveling around and living in the best hotels, the best accommodations everywhere he went, and it the way that he lived his life and the way that he would kind of establish personal relationships with the richest people, and he would start asking them for donations and things like that. It really does kind of, I don't know. I believe that he was a bit of a con man. I don't really believe that he necessarily believed in a lot of the spiritual, I mean, I guess you could say nonsense that he spoke about. That being said, he did touch on a lot of things that have good philosophical value. If you can remove the fact that he was trying to, um, I guess you could say, trick people with mysticism and spiritualism, and just focus on the nature of philosophy and moving the idea of the struggle of humankind forward. Uh, some of the things he said were very valuable. You just have to remember that he was using spiritualism to trick people. And I'm not saying that he necessarily did for sure. If you believe the things that he said, if you go look him up and you're like, oh, this resonates with me, hey, more power to you. As I've always said, whatever you believe is up to you. But for me, I look at things like that. I look at the way he lived his life. I see the discrepancies, and I say, you didn't really believe it. You weren't really a believer. You just knew that the people with money wanted an easy way. And that's what the spiritualism part of it is it's an easier way to achieve the hard stuff that he talked about philosophically. Now, as far as the quote of the day goes, I'm going to say this about it really fast. I do agree with him that the greater scope of humanity is asleep, and that we should all be our personal goal should always be to wake ourselves or to assist others in crawling out of the torpor. Um, I think that is there's value in that understanding. I think that is true. I do think that I don't think that it's a light switch where it's either awake or you're asleep thing. I think that it really depends on the situation, depends on what things like that. I think that we can kind of come and go, we can ebb and flow, if you will, out in states of consciousness. And sometimes we're really engaged and we're really awake and we're really aware, and then other times we check out entirely. And I think that the goal would be to try to, find a way to maintain that awareness, to try to stay engaged as much as possible. I think this quote that I'm going to use today speaks to the how to on that. I think it's really important because it is a quote that has been echoed by numerous philosophers throughout time. Obviously, not in the same, they didn't use the same words, but it's one that they've all spoken either about or to. And I think that when you realize that, you realize that the lesson is good. How you arrive at the lesson and what you do with the lesson is up to you. George Ivanovich Gurdjieff once wrote, "Without self-knowledge, without understanding the working and functions of his machine, man cannot be free. He cannot govern himself, and he will always remain a slave." I'll read that one more time. Without self-knowledge, without understanding the working and functions of his machine, man cannot be free. He cannot govern himself, and he will always remain a slave. Now, when he says always remain a slave, he means that in more ways than one, but he does mean it in the physical sense. He's talking about a slave to your thoughts, a slave to your emotions, a slave to whatever is happening in the physical world. That's what he's talking about. And as long as you don't have knowledge of yourself, of how you're working emotionally, mentally, physically, you will remain a slave to these things. You need to be exercising. You need to be reading and learning. You need to be understanding what emotional intelligence is. These are the keys to waking yourself up, to becoming your true inner self. And that is exactly the message that I have had since day one on this app here and on what I've been trying to do. And so, whether he's a charlatan or not, he absolutely had something of value that came out of him, and I wanted to shine a light on it. So, happy birthday, Gurdjieff. And to the rest of you, take care of yourself. Take care of others. I'll talk to you soon.